Salvete omnes. This is the second of two videos on the forms of the perfect and pluperfect subjunctives. In a previous video, we looked at the forms of the perfect and pluperfect active subjunctives. And in this video, we will look at the forms of the perfect and pluperfect passive subjunctives. This will complete all the forms of the subjunctive that you need to know. Just like the perfect passive indicative, the perfect passive subjunctive uses the fourth principal part of the verb. The fourth principal part of the verb is the perfect passive participle, which is a first and second declension adjective. As an adjective, the participle ending will reflect the gender and number of the subject of the sentence. With the perfect passive indicative, you take your fourth principal part and add the present indicative forms of sum, esse, fui to complete the verb form. So, to form the perfect passive subjunctive, you take your fourth principal part and now add the present subjunctive forms of sum, esse, fui. So let's take an example to see how this works. Let's once again use amo, amare, amavi, amatum to love, which will stand in to show how this works with all of the 5 conjugations. The fourth principal part here, amatum, is technically a supine, which is something we'll learn about in a future video. So, to form the perfect passive subjunctive, we first take our fourth principal part and remove the um ending. For the singular forms of the verb, we then add the endings us, a, the nominative singular line of first and second declension adjectives. The ending that you use in the verb will depend on the gender of the subject. So us reflects masculine, a reflects feminine, and reflects neuter. For the plural forms, we add the nominative plural line of first and second declension adjectives, e, I, a, where again, e would be used for a masculine plural subject, I for a feminine plural subject, and a for a neuter plural subject. In addition to the fourth principal part, we then add the present subjunctive forms of sum. So the perfect passive subjunctive forms of amo, amare would be amatus a sim, amatus a sis, amatus a sit, amati I a simus, amati I a sitis, amati I a sint. So if we take a subject of the sentence, for example, canis, which is masculine and singular, our verb form would be amatus sit, where the ending on amatus reflects the masculine singular nature of the subject noun. But if we took a noun feles as our subject, which is feminine and singular, then the verb will become amata sit, where the ending on the participle is now feminine to reflect the gender of the subject noun. This works in the plural also. If we take a subject weary, the verb would be amartisint, which has the ending that is masculine and plural to reflect the masculine plural nature of weary. But if we change our subject to femini, which is feminine and plural, then our verb will become amartisint. Just like the perfect passive subjunctive, the pluperfect passive subjunctive also uses the fourth principal part of the verb with the same adjective endings. The pluperfect passive indicative is formed with the fourth principal part plus the imperfect indicative of sum, esse, fui. So the pluperfect passive subjunctive uses the fourth principal part, but now the imperfect subjunctive forms of sum, esse, fui. So the pluperfect passive subjunctive of amo, amare is amatus a essem, amatus a esses, amatus a esset, amati I a essemus, amati I a essetis, amati I a essent. And again, the ending of the participle will reflect the gender and number of the subject of the sentence. So with canis, masculine singular, the verb would be amatus esset. But with pheles, feminine singular, the verb would be amarta eset. And in the plural, if the subject were weary, masculine plural, the verb would be amarti essent. But if the subject were feminae, feminine plural, then the verb would be amartai essent. So in this video, we learned that the perfect and pluperfect passive subjunctives use the fourth principal part of the verb plus subjunctive forms of sum esse fui. We learned that the fourth principal part has nominative, singular and plural, first and second declension adjective endings to agree with the subject of the sentence. We learned that the perfect passive subjunctive uses the fourth principal part plus the present subjunctive of the verb to be, while the pluperfect passive subjunctive uses the fourth principal part and the imperfect subjunctive of the verb to be. You should now complete the exercise entitled The Perfect and Pluperfect Passive Subjunctives, which can be found in our learning management system. As always, if you have any questions, either rewatch the video or reach out to me via email. Voilete omnes.